Gonna try it again. Clayton and Parker are on the roof of their building. Parker, we're gonna try this again and see if we can get you in. All right. Fun technical issues with Instagram. Hi, Brian.
Hey. Okay, there we
Hey,
go.
we did it.
All
Okay,
right.
good.
Perfect.
All
Okay.
right, guys. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, we had a bunch of people that had joined. I hope they tune back in. How are you guys this afternoon? There in New
Doing
York
well.
City.
Gorgeous day in New York. How are you in LA?
It is a beautiful day there. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, a little sunshine, and I can't believe it's Friday again. The weeks seem to just be flying by. Insane. Well, just wanted to introduce everybody to the call. Thank you for joining. This is the Thinking About Call series as people start to join. I think now we're over 30 episodes at this point on this series, and it's really to introduce you to artists and creatives around the world. Old friends of mine that I've known a long time, Clayton and Parker Calvert, are based in New York City. They're artists that work together, and they've been working on this incredible drone project for about 5 years now. So wanted to talk to you guys about that. You guys ask questions. It's really cool what you guys have done. So I remember many years ago when you were exploring it. So can you talk about kind of the backstory and how you got started?
Yeah, I think so. Originally, it's actually funny. One of the buildings over our shoulders is one of the first buildings we filmed. And
Mm-hmm.
Clayton and I grew up in New York City. So for us, we use this as an opportunity to explore our city aerially before a lot of the new regulations went into place. And so
Mm-hmm.
now it's not nearly as easy to fly a drone commercially or recreationally in New York. They don't they don't really give out permits to anybody now. So we kind of got in when it was a prime time.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and we were lucky because I think for us, we as artists are always trying to do something new. But in this case, the technology was brand new to the consumer, so it enabled us to actually do something new, literally, but then take our artistic eyes and apply it to this approach. And I think get some really unique footage that I don't think you can ever get again because it was as the city was changing, and we were really just documenting it and capturing it.
No, absolutely. I mean, I have so many questions, but I think the first question is obviously New York City is home, so you wanted to do it there. But did you do a lot of testing with the flying the drone before you went over some of the highly populated areas?
Absolutely. so, so we took an abundance of precaution in this project because when we first got into flying drones in 2015, the software was very unreliable. So we would
Hmm.
fly up at our friend's house in upstate New York in open country fields. And one of the things I always tell people about is inertia. You really have to account for how far ahead you want to stop because it's not like driving a car. You really have to stop a good 30, 40 feet before you actually want to stop. So
Wow.
we kind of got our flight wheels going in the countryside where there was no risk to anybody. And then to add on to that, in New York City, we only flew at Sunday mornings at about 5 or 6 in the morning when nobody was out on the streets. So we took every precaution to limit any possibility of issue.
So cool. And then you covered different cities around the world, so I want to talk about that. But first, can we just sidetrack? Parker, you study photography and filmmaking, and Clayton is oil painter and sculptor. So can you talk about kind of both of your artistic backgrounds for a bit?
Yeah. So for me, I kind of started painting more seriously in high school, and then continued in college, and just saw like a really good path in art for myself. And with sculpting, I started in my early 20s. So it's something that I've just been really passionate about for a long time. And I think that we were surrounded by art growing up in New York, and of course, like traveling and seeing art is also very inspirational. So I just think to then do something entirely different really attracted me when it came to trying out like working with a drone because I'd never really done anything like that before. I'd never flown any like model aircrafts. I don't traditionally do video work. I love looking at video work and I love photography, but it's not what I do. So it gave me a good chance to kind of dabble in that in a way that I felt was unique enough and also something that I was capable.
And as
Yeah.
far as my background, I first had a camera put in my hands when I was probably about 3 or 4 years old. our grandfather was the typical dad who was always filming everything. And when he upgraded his camera, he gave us an old video camera. So our mom has these incredible archives of homemade videos that we made when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. And so we've always been encouraged to, take image making and photography. And, to add on to that, I don't have a formal training in photography. It was largely baptism by fire. And
Okay.
a lot of my father was an amateur photographer. He did it more as a hobby. And my father had a lot of friends who were editorial photographers, a lot of people who I never got to really work with them directly, but they all gave me phenomenal tips about composition, about aperture, about exposure,
Yeah.
and things that I use to this day. So we were very fortunate to have kind of this support system in place of people who were both creative, but also encouraged creativity.
Yeah. So at what point did you fly to Europe, and what was the first city in Europe that you captured with the drone project?
So Rome ended up being the first city in Europe that we flew in. And I was in Rome for an exhibition that I had helped work on back. This was in 2018. And we were there for a rare snowstorm at the end of February, which, as you know, like snow in Rome just doesn't happen. I used to live in Rome, and I never thought I would see it. And not only were we there, but Parker had his camera, so he got some really crazy shots. But then we had the drone. So we flew over Rome, and it was one of the greatest rushes I think you could experience, because you're seeing the city as you can't see it otherwise. I mean, everyone's seen that Fellini thing in La Dolce Vita where, there's the helicopter going through the city and there are all those beautiful aerial shots. But a drone is very different. So it's kind of like this close up, and then with Rome and snow, it just was very unique. And then we went to Florence after that. And in Florence, the snow had just melted, but it was still pretty cold. And there was an election that day. In Italy, they have more elections than we do. So it was just another one of their elections. And the city was really quiet. It was Sunday morning, and we flew over the city in that gorgeous, like, Tuscan light. And we also then got this video of Florence just deserted. So it really kind of worked out for that. And then part of let's talk about Siena.
Yeah, well, a lot of the work that we've been able to do with the aerial work has been kind of under the radar, so to speak, because in Italy, for instance, if we had been caught flying a drone in Italy, in Rome, they would have probably locked us up for the weekend at the very least, and nobody wants to deal with an Italian jail. So
I was going to ask you about that, if you had any issues with the authorities.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think we've taken the biggest risk we've taken is our own freedom. Outside of that, we were always very reticent about flying near landmarks or flying anywhere close to people. So we were very careful about that. But in terms of flying in Rome, we brought it, and I wasn't even sure we were going to fly. But when we saw the snow over the Pantheon, we were just like, there's no way we can't fly it. And when we saw the response, the Romans were sweeping off the snow because they didn't even have shovels. So when you think about the fact that everyone was distracted on one side of town, anybody who was dealing with, the situation, nobody was looking for drones in the sky. And, from what I've seen, if there's any other footage out there, it might be like 1 or 2 people from that day. And I wasn't particularly impressed, but,
because it was the first time it had snowed. Yeah,
Pardon?
It was the first time it had snowed in, 10 years in Rome or something?
10 years, and it was the biggest snowfall they'd had in 30 years. So
Wow.
It was just an unbelievable sequence of events.
How long, so what time for Rome, for example, what time did you start, and how many hours of footage did you get?
The flight we took in Rome was only about 30 minutes. There was a tremendous amount of technical difficulty. So when you're flying in the middle of an active snowstorm, that is a very risky endeavor, but also it messes with the radio communication. So there were a couple times, and luckily the drone software is pretty advanced where you have a feature that can just bring it right back to where you took off from. But there were a couple times where our radio sequence got disconnected. And we were just kind of sitting there unable to see where the drone was. And then 10 seconds later, it joined back, and we're like, we could breathe again, because when you have something like that happen, especially in a foreign country, you're just like, this is brutal. To answer your question about timing, we got up about sunrise, and we had actually had plans to go to St. Peter's Basilica that day. And just on another note, after we flew our drone for the 45-minute flight, we did go to St. Peter's Basilica, which is where I got the photo. It's on my website, but of the 3 nuns in front of St. Peter's. And we were the only people we were the last people to get into St. Peter's. So we were alone in St. Peter's with like 40 other people, which is just an experience you can't replicate.
Amazing.
It's a magical day. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what was it like in Siena? I mean, the beauty of that one, and also I want to ask you about the music for the videos. For those of you that haven't seen the videos yet, I shared some in my stories, but they're, you know, online where you can see them. But talk about the music and Siena in particular.
So it was interesting with Siena. We had connected with the Siena Art Institute, and basically we were going over there for a conference they were giving. Nathaniel Kahn, who did The Price of Everything, was speaking, and they were kind of talking about different structures in art markets and just how, you know, European versus American is a pretty interesting thing. So we went over for that. And of course, doing that, we said, well, we think we can drone it too. So we wrote to the mayor of Siena, and then we got permission, and then we get to Siena, and there was a new mayor, and they said, well, if the old mayor did it, we're not going to do it. So then they revoked the permission. And so we said, well, we've done it twice before anyway, like, why not a third time? So we got up at the crack of dawn, and that was, again, you know, another great example of just like good timing, but also good light, because when you get that sunrise properly, it just illuminates in different ways throughout the flight. So,
and for those who may not be familiar with Siena, it's where they host the Palio horse race every year, which is the longest running horse race in the world. And it's something like 600 or 700 years old. They've been running the same horse race. And it's a very big matter of regional pride. So Siena is compartmentalized into what they call different contradas. And there's, I believe, 13 contradas, and each is their own governing faction. So when they do the Palio horse race, it's a huge matter of pride for the different neighborhoods. And so that was part of what happened when we got permission from one contrada, is when it switched to a new contrada, they kind of take over. And so when we got there, we'd already had our flight booked, we'd already had everything set up. And, you know, we talked to the people who had originally kind of cleared the permission with us, and they're like, yeah, sorry, you can't fly. And we were like, okay, we won't. And then Sunday morning came, and the thing that's really nice about, if you look at that big public square, which is where they have the tallest tower in Siena, that public square is kind of what I would call like the sheep meadow of Siena. It's where all the kids hang out at night. It's where all the adults go and get dinner. They all hang out on that square. That's like their Times Square as well. So when we shot there, it was on a Sunday morning, which was the night after everybody gets, you know, to having a good night, and nobody is up early on Sunday morning. So the only people, there were maybe one or two people in Siena, and the people who were there in that square were the guys cleaning up the garbage that morning. So we just had this, you know, again,
incredible.
People aren't used to seeing places empty, but it's weird that now everywhere is so empty, because on Sunday mornings at 5 or 6 in the morning, almost everywhere is relatively empty. So, you know, it's kind of an interesting dynamic.
In the Siena, I think it was the Siena footage where you can see a lot of birds. Are those birds or are those bats? Because I mean, those are flying. Those are birds flying around the dome.
Those are swallows, and they all live in the clock towers. You know, I did not plan for that, because you don't see them at all times of day. And I actually had like a mini heart attack when we were flying, because ultimately, you know, I would hate to have anything happen to any animal, period. And that just gave me such a moment of anxiety. But it seemed like they stayed about 20 feet away at all times. They were more curious and I think protective of their domain. But, you know, for what it's worth, I don't think I would ever do that flight again because of that. I don't need to, but at the same time, it added such a beautiful dynamic element to the footage. And that's something that was just, I always think of birds as kind of like a peppering or a gift of the scene. And it really added a dynamic nature.
So do you guys take turns driving the drone, or how does that work? Or do you, if you get anxious, does Clayton take over, for example?
We both have done a large number of flights. I also prefer not to say who did which flights, because I think it's better that way. But it's also one of those things where we both have flown a lot, and it's very much a team effort. So I always kind of think of it as like and this may not be the best analogy, but I think it gives you an idea, like a sniper. Whenever a sniper is out there, he has a spotter. and the spotter's taking the measurements, the spotter's helping with the wind, the spotter's helping with all the things that you can't do when you're focusing down the sight. So
Sure.
you can't really do one without the other. And so I think it becomes a matter of just kind of non-importance, who was the one flying and who was the one spotting, because you can't do it without the other. So that's really how it works. And the other part of that is safety, because if you're looking at your screen, your face is looking down, and you're watching it like you're watching like a video game almost. But you have to have somebody with their eye on the drone at all times. Legally, you have to, but also as a matter of precaution, it's very important to have a line of sight. So you never let the drone leave your line of sight.
So I was noticing in the New York City video, you're in front of the Time Warner buildings, and that drone starts at ground level, and then it's going up, and the reflective sun on the building is really magical. And then the drone keeps going and climbing and climbing and climbing. And how high have you gone with the drone?
Within the legal limits.
Good answer. Good answer.
You know, so the rule of thumb in New York is 400 feet. And that's primarily for air traffic. Helicopters are not allowed to fly below that, at least non-police helicopters.
And also at the beginning, when we were doing it, like, so that Columbus Circle flight, there were cops that saw us doing it, and like they kind of just like to see the screen. So this was like before they even knew it was not technically allowed in New York. So it was just such a good time to be doing it. Nowadays, I think they can give you a ticket or confiscate your drone. They've got a little bit more jurisdiction as to that. When we were doing it, it was basically the FAA, but the FAA had no one enforcing the rules. So there was nobody kind of policing the use of drones in the way they are now.
So what other cities? I mean, New York, Siena, Rome, you know, those are the big ones. You've also done
San Francisco. San Francisco is a lot of fun. We have not put together a video for that, so we might just have to do that. I went on a separate trip years ago, and I shot in Iceland over an active volcano. That was really exciting. We've done some flying in LA, but you know, ultimately a lot of our flights, we've taken a bit of a hiatus in terms of we haven't filmed in New York since they imposed a lot of new restrictions because it's just not worth it. And a lot of what we were able to do was because we were taking advantage of a specific moment in time where if a police officer stopped you, they were more curious than apt to find you and take your drone. So we haven't been doing as many metropolitan places, but I think one of the benefits of having the press that we got recently was it opens up a lot of conversations, and it enables people to have giving out a permit or requesting permission, because you can kind of see that at the very least, I think it looks like we know what we're doing.
Yeah. Talk about, somebody mentioned south of France. Can you talk about the videos that you shot there?
Yeah, that was really fun. We went on a big road trip down in the south of France. We drove from Paris overnight and showed up in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence in the morning, which is where Van Gogh was in asylum at Saint-Paul-de-Massol. So we flew over that and around the countryside there, kind of documenting his footsteps, but also the beautiful countryside. And then we ended up over in Arles. So Arles, another city that we filmed. We flew over the ancient Colosseum, which dates back to Roman times and is better preserved than the Colosseum in Rome. They actually, the entire town of Arles lived there in the Middle Ages, when it was like 20,000 people. So it's an amazing building that's been used for so long. And then we flew elsewhere too. So I think it was just that idea of going over to Cannes after, you know, Arles, and then flying over, you know, that beautiful vista on the ocean, or rather on the sea, where you see all the hotels and all the mountains in the background. And actually in Cannes, the seagulls kept trying to attack the drone. It was an older model. It was the Phantom 4, and they kept trying to dive bomb it. And so that was pretty nerve-wracking as well. So it was just a great...
Did any of them knock it down?
Pardon?
Did any of them...
They came a lot closer than the swallows. I think they're a lot more territorial because they have a lot more to fight for scraps in Cannes.
Yeah.
And then we did Saint-Tropez as well, this vineyard outside of the town there. So it was a great chance to kind of fly in the south of France and just really enjoy getting those unique vistas there too.
And just to piggyback on what Clayton said, I think one of the things that I really enjoyed about this project is highlighting a lot of the architecture that you really never get to see from these vantage points. So when we flew in Florence, you get to see the Duomo from directly above it. in Siena, you really get to see the intricate little narrow roadways and all of the city planning. You know, the Colosseum that we filmed in Arles in France, it was just, you know, for me, we both love history. And I think to be able to appreciate the accomplishments of the builders of prior,
Yeah.
you know, if I could, I would fly in Egypt. That would be a life dream for me. So,
Yeah, you're answering some of my future questions here. That's where I was going to ask. Egypt is one. Where else would you guys like to go?
I would love to get permission for Venice. That would be really fun. I think it'd be a gorgeous place to do it. Some people have done illegal videos, but it's very, very restricted there. If we could somehow get permission for Paris, that would be incredible, but I know that's tough too. London would be great. But I think that hopefully as time goes on, municipal authorities will start working with artists and filmmakers to allow them to use drones in these areas at these times, because I think it would be a real loss if you weren't able to get these vistas going forward, especially because the technology's gotten better and better, and it's just much, much safer now. So yeah, those are a couple.
Yeah, well, Egypt is the top of my list. I've actually yet to go to Egypt, and so it's been a little bit of a bucket list item for me my whole life. But I'm waiting for the new Grand Cairo Museum to open, and I just feel like, you know, when you look at the arc of civilization from Mesopotamia through Egypt and all of that region, it's just it's such a rich history, and everything we have today has kind of come through that trajectory. And so I think highlighting the builders of past and people who have done incredible accomplishments, I think that's something that I'm very passionate about. Outside of cities and architecture, I'm obsessed with volcanoes. So I would love to fly over places in Chile. I would love to fly over places in Guatemala. I'd love to fly over places in Hawaii. My trip to Iceland, I don't know if you recall, but there was a volcano that erupted in 2010 that shut down all of Europe's air travel for like 2 months. I actually I was on a fashion shoot there, and I ended up sleeping on the side of that volcano. And when we got to fly the drone over it the next day, there's just this real, you know, it's amazing what humans have been able to build. But when you look at what nature provides, and when you look at the natural beauty that there is, that's something that I really want to highlight more. And I think a drone is a phenomenal tool to doing so.
Yeah, absolutely. So you sat on this footage for a number of years before you released it publicly. And obviously because of COVID and everybody in quarantine, I knew you guys released some of this footage, or part of the footage during this time right now that we're living in. So kind of what was the motivation? And you talk about the process that you guys went through emotionally to kind of release this to the public.
So I think that we always did plan on releasing it eventually. We kind of felt that with time it got better because it's a time capsule of sorts. And then, of course, with what's going on in the world right now, I think that it's a time when everyone would love to be traveling. I mean, I miss travel so much, and just like seeing friends abroad, but seeing the sights and seeing everything. So we felt like we could give this footage to people in a time when they really needed it, and also a time when they had the attention span for it, because, you know, we've all been at home. We've all been doing what we're supposed to. And if you're doing that, then you will get bored. And so if you're bored, what better thing to do than to look at art and see things that, like, you could just never see otherwise.
Yeah, I feel like in sitting on the footage for so long, part of what we knew is that, as he said, it gets better with time. But also, you know, we really, during the time that we released it, it was a lot of happenstance, because we'd been planning to release it soon anyway. But then the timing just, you know, in a weird way became ideal, because it's not, I don't think it's the kind of travel footage that like makes people sick watching you dip your feet in the ocean type thing. You know, it's like, this is sharing a view that you can't get even when you are traveling. So it's really a way to virtually travel, and it's almost like a VR experience where you get to see these places, and they're short vignettes. You know, at the end of the day, none of the videos are longer than 5 minutes, and that's purposeful because I want people from all over to see it. And you know, when I was able to track some of the analytics of people who were watching it, you know, people in Turkey were watching it, people in South America were watching it, and that brought me great joy, because to see people connected, you know, across boundaries digitally, but through the beauty of art, I think that's kind of what art is all about. You know, it's a unifying force, and it means a lot to be able to contribute and participate in that way.
Yeah. So that brings me to the next question. You're going to be selling some of the art at some point in the future, and you're going to do a physical exhibition of some of the photography. So can you talk about that a little bit as well?
Yeah, so I'll have to keep you guys posted on where the exhibition is, but I'm extraordinarily excited, and it will probably be one of the most more exciting shows we've been able to participate in. So I unfortunately cannot say where it is yet, and I know that sounds a little cryptic, but it will be out on the West Coast, and it was slated to be in August, but given you know, the shutdown, the scenario, we're just in a holding pattern. So we will be debuting the photos as well as a lot of the video contents in a show out there. And we're very, very much looking forward to it being in that type of setting, because ultimately we want this footage to be in museums. You know, I really, really want people of all backgrounds, of all ages, of all creeds, anybody and everybody to be able to see this and enjoy it, because there's a ubiquity to it where it's, you know, the footage, you know, to put it in perspective, when we first started flying drones, we had one of the more lucrative offers I've ever been offered by a real estate company, one of the developers in New York. And when I stepped into the room and when we showed them the footage we had, to get an offer right in the room was like a big red flag for me, because I'm like, oh, there's an old saying from P.T. Barnum, but it's like, if you don't know who the sucker in the room is, it's probably you.
Mm-hmm.
But I just kind of got the feeling that they were trying to take advantage of us. And so I did a little bit
Yeah,
more
sure.
research, and I'm so thrilled we turned down that offer, which was, at the time, I was like 26, and it was the best deal I'd ever been offered. It was more than I'd ever made in any endeavor. But it would have been such a big headache, and it also would have trivialized the artistic nature of what we were doing. So we made a
Yeah.
very conscientious decision at that point not to commercialize it in a way that would challenge or jeopardize the integrity of what we were trying to do. So that said, we've been very protective of how we put it out there, and even just releasing the vignettes we put out there, you know, in a way that's giving it away, because anybody can view it, anybody can screenshot it, anybody can share it. And there's a
Yeah.
part of me that really likes that. I think, you know, there's a businessman in me, which is like, that's not necessarily the smartest thing, but there's an artist in me, which is like, that's really what art is about. And so, you know, to be able to do that and to be able to protect the integrity of the project and the creativity and the openness of it, it meant a lot to me, and I know it meant a lot to Clay as well. So.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and you guys were generous enough to work with me on a couple of photos. So Sienna 1 and 2, there's a couple of photos. If you guys are interested,
Yes.
anybody that's listening, in those photos, talk to me, and then we can get you pricing. Go back to some of the stories that that really stand out for you. You know, is there a story where the drone like hit something or crashed, or like, you know, obviously there were wind conditions and snow conditions and birds and bats and other things, but share some other stories.
Well, I mean, one time I was flying on the beach in Rhode Island. This was very early on, and the drone literally just flew away into the ocean. You know, like the software malfunctioned, and then it just went farther and farther away, and then we lost the signal, and then we lost the drone. So, I mean, these things have happened. You know, fortunately, not in New York. So the thing is, you kind of got to take your licks when you're learning and practicing in the country, I think is the best way to do it. But luckily now, I think it's just, not only are we've come a long way ourselves, but the technology is just so much better than it ever was. So you wouldn't have that happen again.
Yeah, there's a couple incidences. We spoke about Rome already, so I won't reiterate that. But one time we were flying near the Brooklyn Bridge, and 3 undercover detectives pulled up to us, and they basically were like, you know, you're not allowed to do that. And I was like, well, I have a line of sight. I made the argument as to why I was allowed, but I also know in New York, you know, you kind of got to just respect that. And so they just said, you know what, just get out of here. Just get out of here. And I was like, okay, I'll take the slap on the wrist and I'll get out of here. And that was the first and last time we filmed anywhere near the Brooklyn Bridge.
Was the drone still in the air at the time?
Oh, it was. They watched me and made me pull it in. So it was, that was a little nerve wracking. Sienna with the birds was very nerve wracking. I think the other part of this is, you know, a lot of people are like, wow, you guys got so lucky with this, or, you know, you got so lucky with this. And I saw a speech with Tracy Emin, who I know you appreciate. And she said, you know, I forget who told her this, but she reiterated, she said, you know, the funny thing about lucky people is how hard they work. And, you know, it always resonated with me, because what people don't see are the mornings that we would get up at 5 a.m. and it would be raining outside, or the mornings that we would get up at 5 a.m. and it would be too windy to fly, or the moments we would get up and the footage just, you know, early on, you might forget to press record. And you'd be flying for 30 minutes and you think you had the best footage ever, and you'd bring it down and you just would just like do one of these guys.
Yeah, because it was
Well, you forget to,
now,
or you forget to clean the lens or something.
Well,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Sometimes you would forget to put the memory card back in, and this was just the kind of stuff that was like, you know, when you're flying at 5 in the morning, you start to do all the prep work and the double checking and triple checking the night before, because once you have that happen once, you don't ever want it to happen again.
Yeah. So what are you guys doing now? Like during this quarantine, what have you guys both been doing as artists, and how have you mentally and emotionally been doing?
So for me, I was lucky to be able to do watercolors throughout this. We share a studio in the Navy Yard where I do oil paintings, and that was shut down because they're producing they're doing PPE there. And then I also have a studio down at Three World Trade, which is reopening very soon to like go back and start painting there. So my studios were closed. So I had to then take, you know, like kind of what you would do back in the day, like what Turner did when he went around Europe. You take your watercolors and you work on them because it's mobile, and you can just work on them outside of your studio. So that was my outlet. I've really enjoyed seeing my peers work as well, just watching people find ways to get their things out there and to show their process, to kind of show more of their work than they might otherwise be able to, and to like gain a new audience. I think it's a really positive moment for artists who have found the right channels and methods of engaging. But I think there are also a lot of artists that are still looking for that. So I just hope that that people can understand that art makes the world better, especially in a time when people like, you know, can't do the things that they've always enjoyed doing as much.
And for me, I think early on in the quarantine, I think there was a bit of a paralysis for most people, where you just didn't really know what was okay. Could you go outside? Could you go do this? Could you go do that? And so in the beginning, I think in terms of like the mental struggle of it, it's just kind of figuring out ways to be productive despite all that's going on, and realizing that, you know, any plight or any issue that we may have suffered pales in comparison to the real overall issue. So, you know, keeping that in mind, once I got out of that kind of space of just like the paralysis of not knowing what to do or how to work, I've actually been documenting a lot of New York City under lockdown. In particular, early morning, wearing a mask and gloves and solo, just going out and taking photos or taking video. And I was actually working on one of my first public sculptural projects. Right when the quarantine hit, I was in the process. I had done, I'd say 95% of the work, but I just needed to fabricate it. And so it was a bit of like a rough, you know, moment, because I was so excited, and I still am so excited about that. But now, as it started to open back up, I'm in talks with the fabricator, who it looks like I should be able to get that out in the next like month or so. So I'm very excited to have just been able to continue to create, to continue to just observe and be present, but to, you know, try some new projects and to just put the work out there.
Yeah, it's great, guys. Where can people go to watch the videos? Can you talk about that?
So currently my website, parkercalvert.com, it's the same as my Instagram handle. That's where we have most of the videos. I have yet to link to the ArtNet article or the Forbes article. We put out 6 of the drone videos with those 3 for each platform. And then my most recent project, I'm actually, I'm waiting to launch the video. I shot a short film with a friend of mine. We social distanced throughout the entire project and shot it. And we shot it in an empty New York City on a Saturday morning from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. So it's one of those things that, you know, filmmakers would have to pay. You probably couldn't even get the permit to shut down the places we shot. We shot at Times Square. We shot at Bryant Park. We shot at Union Square. We shot on the Brooklyn Bridge. And he and I just took our bicycles out one morning, and it was a very laborious task, but I'm very happy and proud with how the video came out. And I think it's a very good time capsule of this moment in New York City history. And as a bit of perspective as to what that means, you know, Clayton and I grew up here in Manhattan our entire lives, born and raised. So we've been here for everything, you know, every good moment, every bad moment, the blackout, Sandy, 9/11, you know, all the things that you really see the fabric of New York and the people who come together. You see the helpers, you see the energy of this dynamic city. And I think this moment feels very similar to a lot of those aforementioned moments because, you know, there's, as I said, the initial paralysis, but then when you come on the other side of that, there's a pride and a joy, and there's, you know, a real community in New York. And that's one of the things we love about this city. And, you know, of course that's present in other places, but everybody knows there's nowhere like New York. So.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. They're still doing the cheering at 7 o'clock. Is it 7 o'clock every night?
Oh, yeah, it's such a wonderful thing. No matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, everybody stops and just goes and cheers. And I have a few friends who are nurses and doctors, and they've all told me it just means a lot to the people who are out there, you know, the grocery workers, the postal workers, the delivery guys, everybody, you know, everybody ought to be appreciated. And I think we're seeing people who otherwise may not be appreciated, who are, you know, we see how integral and vital everybody is to the entire like ecosystem of New York.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I love New York, as you guys know. I lived there for 17 years, and I miss being there, and I miss seeing you guys. And I appreciate you doing the call today. I'm really excited to share this video with more people. As I end the call, you guys, it'll go directly to my IGTV, and you can watch it and you can share it. And we'll also post it to YouTube so we can all share it with our friends and family. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, we really appreciate just the time.
Of course.
And we love what you're doing, so really appreciate it. Thank you.
Keep up the good discussion.
Of course, guys. Really respect you both. And I'll talk to you soon. I can't wait for the exhibition here on the West Coast. So keep us posted about that.
I'll let you know as soon as we can tell you more.
All right, cool. Awesome, guys. All right, have a good weekend.
All right, see you later.
Bye.